welcome to episode 3 of the Anibros podcast. We
If that's what
haven't
we're calling it.
we don't have a name. I'm not
Yes,
fucking
yeah.
around with I haven't even
My,
put out episode 1 yet. I'm not going to think of a
my
name.
proposal was Annie fights, or
Annie
no,
fights.
because Annie, is also
We want to we
other.
want to include us fighting and us. I feel like this is exactly the conversation we had last week.
No, yeah, it is, but I don't think did we have it on the pod? I don't think so.
Did we? Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. It's
Yeah,
a good question. Today we're talking about Cells at Work and its
it's
sort of darker spin-off series, Cells at Work
one of.
Black. Now, last time I had a list of points, and actually in episode 1 as well, I had a list of things that I wanted to talk about before we even started recording, just because like that's how I like to get myself organized, and I felt like I could make better
The
points.
show. Yeah.
But last week you told me that you didn't want to be in a review show.
Oh,
And
okay. I
And
think
in my head, I kind of felt that was a little bit silly because I didn't think we are a review show. I thought we were just like talking about anime. But like,
there's
fair enough. In looking back and like listening to myself and my god awful quality, yeah, I do make a sort of reviewy style of point. So how?
I'm yeah, sure. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, not to knock on review shows, but that's just not the content I like, and it's not the content I want to be making either. So it's like, that's just my sort of. If you go to like this is speaking to like our audience. If anyone goes to like any person to watch stuff that's just basically you're just watching the show again, but through someone else's perspective, that's totally fine, and but that's just not what I'm interested in, and that's not it's not like I can't make that, but I just think there's more interesting
You
things
want
you can
to
do.
be something a little bit different. You don't want to be another thing on the market. You don't want to be one bottle of shampoo on like a shelf of shampoos.
In the same way that like last time I sort of like I say I'm an elitist because it sort of shields me from the criticism of, well, why are you trying to tell everyone how to consume media? No, the important thing I think is just that media is cerebral and it affects how media has effects on real life. Like you're not watching something and then you just dump it after. And so a review show kind of just wouldn't be meaningful to me, I think. I want to make something that people are actually thinking about.
We can touch on that part later, but you mentioned this before that you're an elitist. You
Oh
say it
no,
like that's something to be proud of, but like,
I mean, I'm just saying it's not like
isn't that like exactly not what you want to be?
people use elitist as a pejorative, and I think that's fine. And I call
The
myself an
fuck
elitist
is a
only because it's sort
pejorative?
of like
What's
oh, use
pejorative?
as a bad thing. Yes, it's just another word for another
Okay,
word. It's a semantic. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I call myself an elitist just because it's sort of like I don't want to argue forever about whether or not people whether or not my opinions are meaningful or not, because every single time, like, well, not every single time, sorry, that's a gross exaggeration. When you're arguing with someone about like sort of opinions and takes and subjective stuff, you sort of like occasionally you'll hit a wall of, well, that's just your
Yeah, no,
opinion.
no, I totally get what you're saying. I think you're being a little too soft, if I'm being honest. You don't need to be an elitist to be like, ah, these people have bad opinions.
No, okay, so I don't think it's necessarily I would rarely, if ever, invalidate a read on a sincere read on anything. Like the way you watch something, like people
Ooh,
engage with
do you
media
hear
different.
that? If you have fake reads out there, watch out.
No, there's insincerity out there. Like this is one of my general principles when engaging with people on the internet is I don't think it's actually that hard to gauge sincerity. Like I don't want to go into
Do
it,
you
but
think of sincerity as like something that can be defined, like
um
person to person?
that's silly. I'm not going into a semantic argument. When you're talking with someone else, like you can tell when someone's acting in good faith or not.
Yeah,
Like
of
not
course.
necessarily immediately, but you can gauge someone's actions and decide whether or not you think they're acting in good faith and whether or not it's an argument worth getting into. Where was I? Oh yeah.
Cells at work.
Yeah, I
so
could have gone on forever,
so
but
we've
yeah,
gone
maybe
we've gotten two series. I've watched all of both of them. Well, actually no,
uh
I haven't. There's a So Cells at Work, the first one came out, and then there was a follow-up like season 2 of that. and then there was Cells at Work Black, which is a sort of spin-off. I've
Mhm.
watched all of season 1 of the original, and I've watched all of season 1 of Cells at Work Black. I have not watched season 2. I suspect that's not going to have a significant impact on my opinion, though.
No, personally, I watched season one when it came out, and then I've seen a bunch of ancillary stuff around it because it just comes up every so often.
So we don't want to do a high level, or do you want to do like a high level, like how do you feel about the show?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of unavoidable that like the reason I wanted to go over these shows is because when season one was coming out, I was actually in a college level immunology course,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yep.
it just so happened this summer that I had to take a graduate level immunology course.
Yep.
So, and Cells at Work Black was about 3 seasons ago. So,
Yeah. It's
and then
somewhat related for sure.
I'm sure pretty much everyone has seen the doctor reviews Cells at Work
The
videos on
Doctor
YouTube.
Who videos, they're
And
so much fun.
when I went through them, like my first impression was, you don't have to be a doctor to sort of gauge this, because the fact of the matter is, for the first show at least, um, it's slightly
It's
higher than
dealing with like
actual.
somewhat common pathogens, and it's dealing with like parts of the body that you should be at least a little familiar with.
Okay, yeah, I guess we can kind of go into it because like the first season, it my sort of overall impression is that it's a very uh not it's a shonen genre show with immunological aesthetic mostly, and then very few but somewhat significant mechanisms. And it obviously it's like if you only ever had like a high school education, it would be more informational, and then any sort of studying you do beyond that, it's not going to be adequate, is
I
what
mean, it's
my
very clearly meant to be a sort of educational thing, isn't
that,
it? It's got little
that's
text
sort of what
pop ups
I'm.
that show up, and it's got like these deep explanations for every cell and everything.
That's sort of what I'm kind of against, is the idea that it's educational, because at best it is like slightly, it lets you know that things exist, and then the few mechanisms that it goes over, it's not really in depth at all. Like well, that's sort of the issue. It is actually like it'll go over some really complex stuff, and then
Isn't
it has to
isn't that the
simplify it.
nature of like educational content on
Oh,
YouTube and stuff though? That you can never
that's
go quite too deep, otherwise you lose the audience.
no, that's the issue. It does go a little too deep at times. Like
Uh,
the molecule that platelets utilize, like that has never come up even in like a graduate level immunology. And then stuff like, and then the mechanisms that
so
it does
what
go
did you
over.
learn from it?
No, I didn't learn from it because I don't remember what it is, even though I had to take it so many times. I don't know what it is. Where did it come from? I mean, no, obviously, it's everyone wants to learn. Like, it's nice to have that trivia level, and then also the fact knowing that I don't think I mentioned it yet, but the mechanisms that it goes over, they're simplified to such an extent that it's not necessarily helpful to like think of it in and you know that's kind of maybe wrong of me to say. Like, I'm sure even just
Yeah,
knowing that.
yeah. It's like as someone who hasn't studied immunology and who's someone who like isn't really aware of their like microbiome and whatever the hell all that stuff is, right?
Uh,
Well, watching Cells at Work, I definitely learned a lot, but like
yeah,
not a lot, a lot. I was just like, oh yeah, white blood cells. Oh, that's what they do, right? Like I got the vague concepts in my brain, and then the series you mentioned earlier, Doctor Hope, really sold me on the show. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I think you know you mentioned before like as entertainment maybe it might have better. You didn't mention this, but sort
oh
of
yeah,
it was implied that it might have better purposes as an
yeah, it is more educate. No,
it is
it is
more
more educated.
entertaining than it is educative.
Yeah.
And I think
And
having
then
the an actual doctor go over the show and talk about cells and antibodies and how they collide in proteins and all these different levels of cells, that really opened my eyes up, one, to the depth that was immunology that I had, I had no concept of before. And then another thing was just it's cool to have like a show, and then as you learn about the show you learn about real life, and as you learn about real life you learn about the show, if that sort of makes sense. It
anyway,
I can always appreciate when fiction, how do I say this, when fiction rewards you for studying.
I can definitely agree with that. And then I think And then Black kind of surprised me in that it's actually like it's a lot better educationally. Like
Oh, educationally it was getting better.
yeah, it's kind of fantastic. I think because like I'm just
That dude, that honestly shocks me. I was watching Black and I was like, I'm not learning as much, but I'm way more invested in this story, this main character that's got going on. It's a lot
yeah,
more trauma and tragedy, and
it's
you
almost
know,
better in every way. Yeah.
it's
Um,
a much harder sold story, and that's it. I feel like it spent less time trying to be educational, really, because of that.
um, that's fair to an extent, I think, because in some ways the level at which it tries to educate you is almost like too in depth. Because like there's a point where it's like aldosterol clears blood cells of alcohol. I'm like, this makes sense to me because I know what's going on. But anyone else sees ADH and probably goes, I don't care anymore. It's just numbers. So I'm like, but then also because it uses, it actually runs into like a bit of an issue where because it's trying to utilize actually pretty easy to understand mechanisms, you sort of get confused. I mean, for me personally, because I know what's going on.
Right,
Like
right, right.
pretty early on in Black, there's hemoglobin, and they discuss how red blood cells are made of hemoglobin and how carbon monoxide replaces. Oh, it doesn't actually go into it. It just sort of says carbon monoxide like
It
turns.
says that if I remember that red blood cells are very reactive to carbon
Yes,
monoxide. Is that correct?
it's reactive in that the hemoglobin, which is where the oxygen binds to, can instead be carbon monoxide is highly like it has a high affinity for those binding spots. So carbon monoxide will bind there and replace oxygen. But because
Hmm.
in this
And
world
that's not
building,
something like your normal person would really care about. They would just be like, "Oh, carbon monoxide's poisonous. Don't give me any of that."
and that's not wrong, but it's also like you if you really wanted to, you could probably like if you in the world building stage, you could have made this such that the oxygen that the red blood cells are carrying around are actually like actively replaced by like the gas that is carbon monoxide. And like that would be so true to the mechanism that it would be it would take one step to make this a lot better educationally, but also it's not like nobody's anyone.
Nobody's like fact checking it. You think?
It's not that important though, like to fact check, because like
Yeah, yeah.
who's gonna misunderstand this a mechanism based on an anime, right? Or
So,
anyone.
when you were doing your immunology course, were you watching cells that work alongside it? Were you keeping track?
Funnily enough, yeah, I was taking
What did it help
immunology.
you study at all? Did it like
No,
serve
it did
you
not.
any all?
Because like the entire everything educational within the first season is basically covered on the first day of like immunology. Because
Oh damn.
the most it gets through is like that like B cells and T cells exist and they have memory, and that's all stuff that you go over on the first day, and then you move on to the how and everything happens. And yeah, that first season is not going to be helpful for anyone in a college level. Again, if you're in high school, I think it would actually be it would be pretty handy, but beyond that, no.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was in high school taking biology, I don't remember anything about T cells and B cells or cancer or any of these things. The most I
Okay,
remember
no,
from
okay.
high school is red blood cells carry oxygen and parts of the heart, right? Like you had to name. I remember there was a diagram that you had to like name the different valves and things.
That cancer bit is actually like something that like upsets a lot of people because it's really not accurate and it's kind of rough. Like the way it turns cancer into a shonen antag that takes over like red blood cells. Like no, that's not how. Like there are plenty of people who were insulted by that, and I think that's kind of fair to be like upset about that depiction because it's just like why are you making cancer look
Well, how do
nice?
you
But
feel about it? How do you feel
I
about the
mean,
cancer episode?
I don't care. It's just kind of boring shonen stuff. It's oh, the cancer has a power level and it's they need everyone to fight it, and I don't, yeah, whatever.
Is
I
that
mean, they
not
don't.
reflective of real life?
No, I mean, there are very specific T cell mechanisms that cancer because cancer is like cancer has. I don't really want to go into medicine right now. This is the weekend, but
It is.
they're basically
We're recording on Sunday as well, so tomorrow you got to go back in and take that immunology class.
No, I'm done with him. You know, that was summer.
Oh, okay, cool, cool, cool.
Cancer. So us, basically, it's not even like something I can really contrast because it's just not
All
representative
right, well
in
let's walk
how it
it
is
back to
actually.
the show and the anime. Uh, for this anime just like existing as an immunology student, is this something you're really like excited about? If someone asks you about your field, can is this something that you would like point to and be like, oh yeah, this is like related to what I do. Look how deep the concepts go. I mean, I think at least for me, computer science major, I find programming and coding really fascinatingly deep and surprisingly creative, given that usually it's like, hey, build an alarm clock, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't sound very difficult, but there's a lot of depth that goes into coding that I wish I could show people. And, I would love it if there was something like this made for my field. I could show off some of the real complexity that goes into what I do.
Oh yeah, like totally. I think programming, like learning programming, is one like really vital way to sort of just understand how logic works to an extent.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
You took
if
discrete
you know
math, right?
programming, you sort of like once you understand like, and the more like math and mechanical applications of math you understand, like you can apply that to real life, like how margins work and like confidence intervals, and like, you can actually like you can evaluate life by math pretty like you'll be more accurate at understanding things as you develop your programming, like, I
So how
think.
so how much value does this show have to you from the perspective of this is like in your field and this is like educating common people?
I think it's the sort of thing where like it doesn't hurt people to watch,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they ought to, but I don't think it's a must watch by any means. Like I don't think neither creatively nor
Must watch in the
informationally.
sense of like, oh, this is like something super incredible and you can really learn from it, or
See, I think
I guess like you would need to define must watch before we really get into.
I think it's sort of obvious that with current events, like increasing the public knowledge of health would be so much better. Like we managed to do it.
We're
That
currently in
said,
2021. We're both
yeah,
living in America. To give
and
you an idea,
yeah, and Delta is killing everyone. Anyway, yeah. So like obviously it's helpful. I definitely think people ought to if they have if they've heard about the show and it doesn't and they have the time and they don't mind a couple cutesy characters with the name T cell and B cell. And you know you ought to watch it. Like why not? It doesn't hurt. But also
yeah, it doesn't hurt anyone to watch it other
if
than your
you're
time,
a
obviously.
if you're similarly like a student of science or biology, it is generally not going to be helpful and may even be harmful in that it simplifies stuff to convey it. And
Does it not help you like visualize though? Does it not
no,
help you like
actually,
to
it's
see the body in this sort of like working city kind of fashion?
like yeah, again, like yeah, I would say the opposite. The visualizations are actually harmful because you have to know like that T cells they develop in one place and they move to another and they learn from like more specific cells because like I don't think dendritic cells come up in the first season and
Yeah, they
they come
barely.
up.
I think there's like at the end of one of the episodes they show up.
Yeah. So a dendritic cell is like core to all development and well not all, but adaptive development. And so like that never comes up. Like if you don't recognize that dendritic cells are utilized in like like I think the T cell turning into a killer T cell, like that sort of episode I think is one where it shows a mechanism and it simplifies it so much that it's kind of not helpful at all to have seen it.
Oh,
Like
that's
so
kind of a shame. It was a good
well
episode as well.
I think this is again where I think black kind of is a lot better for education because it's just almost because they're allowed to sort of acknowledge like stuff like self recognition where like cells attack each other where your own cells attack self cells like that happens in
Well,
the
they touch on it, but
they touch on it yeah but
it's obviously much worse than Black. So the basic idea of these shows, we have Cells at Work, which is very cutesy and very wholesome. There's the body is very healthy in that show, and it encounters like one problem after another, and it's very episodic in its nature, where the main characters are just doing their normal thing. They're talking about, oh yeah, this is the stomach, and then oh no, something's happening to the stomach, right?
And then yeah,
Black follows a very similar structure to the original, but what Black does, as might be implied by the name, Code Black, is that it is from a body that is much less healthy, right? Like they make frequent visits to the lungs, and they're like, "Ah, oh, man, the dude's smoking again. Look how dirty his lungs are." There's like pulp everywhere. The design of the body itself is meant to be something like a big city, and how it's run is meant to mirror like a sort of workplace, right? Like you
just
have like
as a bit of like an Easter egg, Code Black isn't actually like a health thing. Like, you
no,
have Code Blue in that people are unconscious, and
yeah,
like
isn't
Code
that like a first responder thing? Like code yellow, code
yeah,
red.
Code Black is a bomb threat, which is not a health thing, but it is a code, I guess.
Oh, I get
Yeah.
to know more than you for once. So code a black is a work environment. It's meant to be in Japan. You know they have all sorts of issues. I can't comment on how bad they are, but they have some issues with overworking employees and people not getting paid and high suicide rates and things like this. A code black work environment is what you say when you're talking about a company that is absolutely awful. Like you never want to work at these sorts of companies. And code black very much like makes this a point like frequently people are told to like work until they drop. People are told that that oxygen is more important than your life. Things like this are apparently meant to be like mirrors to a code black work environment.
That's kind of funny because like you would think of like in an economic sense, like a business that's in the black would be like good because it's not in the red,
I
right? I mean,
I don't know, but
anyway.
it's always weird when you're an American and you're trying to like peek into Japanese culture a little bit.
Yeah, as always, that's
There's some things that are just never gonna translate super well. This is mostly information that I've gathered from videos about Code Black and uh, a lot of things like that.
nice.
One thing I really like about the show is its depiction of the body. It's a little sad because I think if other animes had more varied body types, this would be more like noticeable. Each cell has a very specific sort of body type and tone and things like this, and so there's like a sort of utopia essence to the show, right? Any little problem gets like lots of people reacting, and I don't know how to describe it. It's got a very particular aesthetic that I find interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the atmosphere of it. Like the first show, I think to go over the methodology of it a little bit. Like the first couple episodes, like sequentially, you sort of get one bad thing happens, and then okay, here's the sort of responses. Like you have a
Yeah,
parasitic
what the
worm,
body does in response to
and then
something.
IgE has
And
to deal with
it's
parasite.
presented as very meticulous, very planned out. You got in Code Black, there's more involvement from the brain, and he's like strategizing and thinking, "Oh, what do we do? What do we do?"
Yeah,
And
honestly,
this
like
is
that's
obviously reflective of how your body would handle these things, right? It's
yeah,
not like you have free thinking cells in your body.
yeah. That's yeah. I don't think anyone has this problem, but when I was watching like anytime I'm watching any of them, I'm like the logistics of this don't make sense, but I'm sure that's not a problem for literally anyone else. I'm just like why is there a tank of oxygen? How much oxygen is that equivalent to? These red blood cells, like obviously nobody has this issue.
that
There's
that
some
level of
wrong.
minute detail is not going to be important, but
I'm
it
sure like
carries the
nobody's
idea,
falling for it.
doesn't it?
It's just like okay, so they bring the oxygen tanks somewhere. What how does because in black like the guy brings it up to like a dead cell and he's like sign this receipt and and it's just like okay, but if this was a working cell, how would this work? Nobody has this
He
problem,
just
man.
like shoves the tank in his mouth, starts pumping.
Yeah. No, so I just think that black is there's something so funny about black, even though every single thing is played straight. Like this the narrator is so like monotone and he sounds like a slightly older gruff guy and like everything is played so straight like there's not really like a comedy beat there's no
No,
punchlines
not at all. It's much more
but it
serious,
is
and I think
so
as a result, it's
funny.
much more like pulling.
Yeah, because like the whole like all the cells are like everyone's dying and we're all this body is so like nicotine is coming and this is gonna happen again and again.
I have
It's
to
so
imagine that if you
acidic.
like jumped into Cells at Work and you started with Code Black, you might be very confused because
Oh yeah, no.
in the first one they spend a lot of time like establishing things like, ah, yes, this is a red blood cell. In Black, I don't think they ever mention that the main character dude. Do they
Oh yeah,
say
no.
that
I don't think.
he's red blood cell?
Well, it's sort of it's obvious by like context, but
It's obvious by context and also the fact that like if you watch the first show you would know. But I wonder how
I'm
like
sure
someone would who would jump in the middle would understand it because
I'm sure
they
it would have
certainly
made
delve into
sense.
more advanced concepts.
Considering like like it's like red blood cell senpais and stuff like I'm sure because I think like the first thing in black is that they're like okay this is the erythroblast facility development facility like that makes sense so I'm sure nobody really had a problem with understanding the whole
The mechanics
needs
of
of
which
that.
the world would work. How would you do that differently? The oxygen thing, is this like something you would measure
Oh
out?
no, okay. That's the thing. Like to be fair to the creative decisions here, like how are you gonna have a show where like an actual the representation of red blood cell is actually like close to how it
Well,
is?
have you heard of this show
Like,
called Osmosis Jones by
oh
chance?
well, okay. I really like Osmosis Jones, but if we're talking about stuff that's like um that's represented by reality, Osmosis obviously put a lot less work into that because. I
Oh,
mean, there.
really? I thought it was better.
Okay, it's better in the things that it
Admittedly, I haven't
doesn't
watched
go.
the show in like 20 years.
Oh yeah, same. But I mean, of course, it goes into a lot more stuff, and by that virtue, of course, like you could say that it's better, but also like
By better,
Osmosis Jones was a
sorry, I
lot
should
less
be
concerned
clear.
about being
I mean
educational.
better as in like better as an
Yeah.
entertainment tool, not as like
Okay.
an
Oh yeah,
educational
definitely.
tool.
I appreciate Osmosis Jones a lot for what it did, like the movie and everything. 'Cause I just like
I
it.
have no memory of it. I just remember enjoying it as a kid.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Whereas this show I would not call it educational. No, I would call it educational,
Yeah,
but
I
I would
mean,
not
like
call it.
if you're not calling it educational, you're sort of running it down a
I'm
little bit, aren't you?
No, okay. So sorry, I meant to say I would not call it like
You don't think it's like a very pivotal tool. You don't think it would be super helpful beyond concepts. Is that what you're saying?
neither show I think is educational really. They both use
Okay,
it for the aesthetic.
come on there, buddy.
No, again, I have to say I think it's.
With all the time, I mean, just like the nature of the show, you can't really say it's not educational. Just
No, I can
depicting
because
these
it's not
things
really
that normal
effective.
people
I
wouldn't
think
be
again, I think it
interested
uses
in
the
looking
aesthetic
at.
for. I think it uses the aesthetic of an educational show to. No, okay, it tries to be educational, but I would not call it effective like in any reasonable capacity.
Why? Because like nothing stuck with you.
Mm, yes, I guess that's the hair I'm splitting. I don't think it anything it really conveyed was significant enough to be called educational, or at least not significantly educational. I don't care that much about splitting all these hairs, you know. Uh,
Okay. Well, what do you want to where do you want to go with it?
I would
Like,
call it
what do
a
you want to talk
fun.
about with this show then?
I mean, I think I sort of went over for the most part what I thought was significant. So,
Well,
that
I'm glad you got all your thoughts out. Like I said before, I hadn't
I don't
really
have like an
thought of
outline on
like
this.
what I wanted to say about it. I just have like some surface level thoughts. I really enjoy the fact that we're getting like these kinds of shows, as I said before. I think there's a lot of unexplored potential
I
with
think
this concept for a show. Just like take things and turn them into anime characters. I guess you don't. It doesn't have to be like things though. Like,
I
cause
think
uh, I'm thinking about my point. Go ahead.
Oh, well, you're that's fine. It's like, I think that it's good fun. Like if it's this show versus another shonen sort of non-educational one, and it
When we
works
were
better
talking
for.
last week, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, go ahead.
I'm like coming to my point in my head. And I'm trying to
I
get the
mean,
words out too.
2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, when we last recorded an episode, one thing you had
Gotcha.
sort of bashed about my show, the
Yeah, 300.
300 years slime show,
Mhm.
was that it was like, well, what did you say? It was not creative.
Yeah, I do not think it had creative value. I was pretty harsh on it. Yes. Uh,
So one place where I hard agree with you there is that the setting of these kinds of shows, this sort of fantasy medieval magic aesthetic has been done possibly to death.
Death.
And
Yes.
it's to the point where you have variations of these shows that have been done multiple times over, as we
So many,
explored in our
so many times
first
over.
episode. I
Mhm.
really do enjoy these sort of like, and often they're little touches, but these sort of shows that try to touch on aspects of human life that aren't directly related to being a high schooler or being a
Yeah,
manga artist. Because it feels like everyone's a fucking manga artist in these shows, aren't they?
everyone's. Yeah, as they
By the
say,
nature of the person
right?
writing them, I suppose.
They say write what you know, and well, I guess for a lot of mangaka, that's being a mangaka.
What I like about Cells at Work, and what I hope the industry sort of takes away from it, is that you can craft interesting stories using this anime formula, because the formula
Mhm.
applied to this show is very anime. You have a
Oh
very
yeah, it's
cutesy main character. You have a very dependable, strong guy character.
the villain of the week is very like we've done this.
You can
Yeah.
take these formulas and apply them to other aspects, like pro mamming. How do you say wink wink?
Nudge, nudge.
Hit me up if you need some advising on that one.
Oh yeah, like if anyone out there is
You don't need to
pretending
like
to be
turn it
a
into like the
gamer.
whole world. You can just be like, hey, this lady's a programmer, and like, I don't know, have a show about
Oh yeah, I
her
mean,
daughter or
didn't you talk
something.
about new game?
Oh yeah, well that's not.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, it's not, but if we're it's
you are
close.
correct that new game, dude. That's a show we should talk about. That I
Yeah, I
wouldn't talk
guess
about any of the video game stuff there, but that is such a good show. All
I'm sure. Yeah, it's fine.
right, I don't have anything else to talk about. How do you like
Oh,
platelets?
huh? I mean, they're cute. I don't care.
Do you ever study a platelet? Do you ever like pull them out of your body?
Oh,
Be
I
like,
mean,
yo, how you
I've
doing,
seen
buddy?
like a microscope of a platelet. That's not like a hard thing to even just look up. But
Ooh.
um, you
Can
know,
I just buy a microphone? How much is a microphone?
a good one will cost quite a bit, but you can get a more than serviceable one for I don't know, maybe $50. That's not
Ooh,
impossible.
that's not bad, dude. That'd be like, imagine like having that as like a desk decoration.
I imagine like a blue Yeti mic or something would be like a lot harder
No,
to.
no, no, not a mic. Oh, did I say mic? I'm fucking dumb.
You
I'm
said mic,
talking
didn't
about
you?
a microscope.
Oh,
To,
yeah, a
like to
microscope is.
put like samples of DNA or something on it.
I mean, like,
Put like a
that's
hair on it.
you can probably get one for like 30. Like honestly, I mean, it's not gonna be like an
All right,
amazing one, but
I'm going to Amazon. Hold on.
I mean, it's funny because we were talking about mics.
Yeah, cause mine is shit.
Yeah, I don't know how mine sounds, but in all my
Yours
recording,
is actually quite good. Yeah,
yeah, I'm
I had
super good.
asked you earlier about your audio setup, and I was like,
It's just
really?
my laptop. I
Fucking OP
I
as hell, dude. Yeah,
I use a little bit of
$40 is the cheapest one. Although it's Amazon's choice, and I always get a little suspicious of the Amazon's choice.
yeah. Uh, I mean, yeah, I would never like if something's being advertised to you, and then there's probably something that's better or cheaper somewhere else that
Well, that's a little bit of a silly way to look on it, but I don't trust Amazon
no,
as
I
a
mean
company more than
just
advertising.
if something has to advertise to you, then evidently it's not doing everything it can to just be a good product. At least that's
I
that's
mean,
you
like,
know my
isn't there like a limit to what a product can be, though? If you're like,
yes
a paper towel company, how much money can you really invest into making these paper towels do well?
yes, but I'm also like I just think that if given a
And also,
reasonable
like, I feel like if you make the best paper towels and you don't advertise, it doesn't
oh
really
yeah, no,
matter how good your paper towels are.
obviously advertising is like a fundamental part of the
Part of
uh,
business.
of business in the current day. Yes,
Business is
so
always such unsavory, isn't it? Such an unsavory
mhm,
topic to try and
yeah,
talk
no,
about.
I believe I hate advertising on like every level. Yeah, um, yeah, but I'm just saying like in the current day, if you're utilizing advertising, then you're probably not spending that money on something else that you could be for your product. That's just how that's my assumption, and it's almost definitely going to be wrong like half the time.
Uh,
But
it's almost definitely going to be correct in terms of Amazon or some
personally,
other
like
major corporation.
I as a person, I think I just put my all into doing things. So like whenever I find like I spent quite a bit of time like looking for like the perfect ring light because I was like, what I want is a gooseneck rim light, but I also want it to be colored. So I spent a lot of time looking for one of those, and there's one that's like over a hundred
Did you
bucks.
spend a lot of time looking because you were trying to find something perfect, or did you spend a lot of
Yeah,
time
yeah,
looking
no,
because you're
'cause
indecisive?
I was looking for the best one, and
I have a
I could
sneaking suspicion that you were just indecisive about what you
and I
wanted.
actually did find a ring light that was gooseneck and also multicolored, and then it was only
Oh, well,
like 20
that's good.
bucks. And so it was like, oh well, I found the perfect thing, and it took me fucking years to find because it was just so hard to. It's just such a specific product. Anyway, yeah, I'm just saying, like, advertising, it'll make you complacent, but also it might not be what you want.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we sort of run dry of this
Tangent.
topic very quickly.
Yeah,
Next time, well, we don't really decide until after we record these what we're doing next.
we decide when I'm not dead tired, and also like, yeah,
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Hope you all got something out of it. I guess
yeah, hopefully.
we're
God
not
knows.
exactly the most entertaining, but we got
You know,
the big brains in the box, so that's all that
I've
matters.
I've mentioned that I have, podcasting friends, and like I think nearly every single podcast I listen to would benefit from having just had a season behind them. Like I think recently I started like Knowledge Fight, and they were like, there's a lot of words we used as pejorative way back then that we don't wouldn't do now, and they have like 600 several hour episodes. So it's sort of evident that podcasters improve with time, and I think my buddy Phoenix Feed, she's like mentioned, please don't listen to like season one of any podcast I work on because she's just like, I just hate the starting on a podcast.
Well,
Hopefully we
that's
get better.
comforting to know we can only go up from here.
Yeah, hopefully
All
we'll
right,
do something.
bye.
Yeah.